So the Chiefs not only have an insanely difficult schedule to finish out the season, but the very identity of the team needs to shift over the next few games if they have hopes of winning another ring. Basically, Mahomes and company must step up because the defense might be running out of steam to carry the team at such a high level every single game. But the good news is, changes are coming in order to potentially see this happen. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? Alright, so after this week of football, week 13, and the conclusion of all the games, minus Monday Night Football tonight, the Chiefs remain the top seed in the AFC after somehow managing to beat the Raiders on Friday. But there are also several teams nipping at their heels, and that means if the Chiefs want to keep the 1 seed down the stretch, they probably can't afford to lose many, if any, of their remaining games. The Bills are just a half game behind KC at the moment and also hold the tiebreaker over them since they won against Kansas City a couple weeks ago. Buffalo also just dominated the 49ers last night in a fun little snow game, 35-10, with CMC possibly suffering a season-ending knee injury, which is rather unfortunate because he just came back after missing most of the season. Well, after the Bills in the playoff picture, the Steelers sit at 9-3 and currently hold the 3 seed, thanks in part to the Bengals' atrocious defense that allowed the Steelers to put up over 500 yards on offense and 44 points. The Texans are next at number 4, sitting atop the AFC South at 8-5 after narrowly beating the Jags by 3, who were without Trevor Lawrence for most of that game due to a concussion sustained from a dirty hit by Azeez Al-Shaair. Don't like that at all. Then the Chargers are the 5th seed at the moment, coming off a 4-point win over the Falcons, in which Kirk Cousins threw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interceptions in this game. Then the unbeatable Ravens, that have now lost 5 games, are the 6th seed after losing to the Eagles 24-19. So they ended up losing by 5. Meanwhile, Justin Tucker, who used to be automatic, missed 2 field goals and an extra point, and that makes him just 50% from 50 yards or more over the last 2 seasons. Tucker is 7 for 14. Meanwhile, for comparison's sake, Harrison Butker is 9 of 11 at 50-plus yards in that same time frame. So the Ravens, they might have a tough decision on their hands here very soon because every point matters in the playoffs, and right now, it's tough to depend on Justin Tucker to make those points. Thankfully, the Chiefs shouldn't have to worry about that. Butker's going to be back by the playoffs. I just hope his knee is fine and his accuracy doesn't take too big of a hit if he has to change up his technique once again. Anyway, another AFC West team in the Denver Broncos are currently the 7th seed, and they take the Browns on shortly after I release this video tonight or yesterday, depending on when you watch this, on Monday Night Football. But a win for the Broncos would make them 8-5 and 2 games up on the Colts, who are currently on the bubble, the playoff bubble, at 6-7. So that makes 3 AFC West teams in the playoff picture currently. And now that I've laid out the current playoff picture as it stands right now, it goes to show you how insane the last stretch of the season is for the Chiefs. And here's why. 4 of their last 5 games are against teams that are currently in the playoff picture. They play the Chargers this Sunday night, who again are the 5 seed right now. The Browns are next on the schedule, not in the playoff picture, of course, but then KC takes on the 4th seed Texans, the 3rd seed Steelers, and the 7th seed Broncos to end it all. So you combine that with the fact that KC's bye week was way back in week 6. They haven't had a lot of rest in forever. And then 3 of these last 5 games are being played in an 11-day span. Browns on December 15th, Texans on Saturday, December 21st, and the Steelers on Christmas. This end-of-season stretch is going to be absolutely brutal and crucial. If KC drops a couple of these games, which is certainly possible, I mean, you can't win them all, and a lot of these games have been very close, stressful down to the wire games. If this happens, though, they drop a game or 2, they could find themselves not only missing out on the first round bye, but also potentially needing to play their starters week 18 against the Broncos. Obviously, a lot can happen between now and then. Maybe the Chiefs here in the next few weeks, they lock up the AFC West again, which they most likely will do. And if the 1 seed is out of their reach, they might opt to rest their starters week 18 anyway, especially if it's not going to do too terribly much to them from a playoff seed perspective. If the 1 seed's on the line, though, they're probably going to play. We are certainly in for some wild games here down the stretch, including the very next game against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. The Chargers are an interesting team right now. Their offense put up just 3 field goals on the day on Sunday in their win over the Falcons against an Atlanta defense that is ranked 22nd, allowing an average of 24.3 points per game. The Chargers defense gave them the ball back, talking about their offense, 3 additional times via those interceptions, and yet 3 field goals is all they could muster. One of the picks went to the house, and they then converted a 2-point conversion, which is how they scored a total of 17. And heading into Sunday's game last week, LA was 31st in yards per game and 30th in points per game in the second half. And that'll be something to watch for in this upcoming matchup against the Chiefs defense that allowed Bryce Young to put up 27 and then give up 340 yards and 2 passing TDs to Aiden O'Connell. So can the Chiefs turn it up, turn things on in the second half in particular, where the Chargers have struggled? Justin Herbert, though, is a different animal, in my opinion, compared to Aiden O'Connell or Bryce Young, and both of those teams do not have a coach like Harbaugh. I think they are one of the best coached teams already in the NFL, and Harbaugh just freaking got here. Back to Herbert in particular, though. He's thrown 13 touchdowns on the year and just 1 interception, which is pretty impressive. He's not asked to throw as much compared to seasons past, but his favorite pass catcher by far is their second-round rookie, the Irishman, Ladd McConkey. Ladd has 58 catches for 815 yards and 4 touchdowns on the year, but is averaging 5.5 catches for 91 yards a game over the last 6. Pretty impressive. Now, McConkey has been dealing with a shoulder issue and also left the game late in the third quarter with a banged-up knee, with the extent of that knee injury unknown post-game. So we shall see if Herbert is out his top target in McConkey this week. And if that wasn't enough for them, the Chargers also just placed their top running back on injured reserve, J.K. Dobbins, with an MCL sprain. So they're going to be without Dobbins for sure, and maybe also Ladd McConkey. We'll see. I'll dive more into this matchup later on in the week, but regardless of those 2 playmakers, this will be a tough game either way as KC hits the road against their second division opponent in back-to-back weeks. And before I get into the rest of this video, I wanted to plug a couple quick ways you can support the channel. One is by buying some HBTC merch like these Dad Bod season shirts among many others. And then you could also pick up some HBTC coffee of Benchwarmer Brew. It's one of the highest selling coffees of the lineup aside from F the Ref, so you can even get that if you really want to. Again, those are just a couple of ways to support the channel. Links are in the description down below. Next up, I want to talk about the state of the Chiefs heading into this very difficult final stretch of the season, because there's a noticeable difference in a couple key areas when comparing the offense and the defense, and the very identity of the team may need to change, especially if they want to make another deep playoff run. It's no secret that the Chiefs' pass defense is struggling. They are currently 23rd in passing yards per game allowed with 224 and 20th in completion percentage allowed at 65.5%. Combine that with the hunt for cornerback 2 still taking place, even though Jalen Watson has been out since October 20th, and also the defensive line being in the bottom of the league in sacks. It's been some tough sledding for the defense, especially in recent weeks. The Chiefs' defense has uncharacteristically allowed over 25 points per game on average over the last 3 games, giving up an average of 378 yards as well, which is not great, especially considering that, again, 2 of the last 3 opponents haven't exactly been high-powered offenses from a statistical standpoint. Now, here's a couple bright things. Joshua Williams played well after coming in early last game for Najee Johnson, allowing 0 receptions on 2 targets and 53 defensive snaps played. So that's nice, but it's not just a cornerback 2 problem. Several guys back there have been having a tough time recently, even Trent McDuffie, and I do think part of that is related to the D-line's inability to get home to the quarterback when rushing 4. Again, they are bottom 6 in sacks right now, as you can see on the screen, but the return of defensive end Charles Omenihu should, in theory, help a bit with that. He looked pretty good in his return last week, even though he didn't wow you from a stat sheet perspective, and should only get better as he knocks the rust off. Even with that, though, I think the Chiefs are going to need to lean more heavily on the offense if they want to win these games, which is something they haven't really needed to do as much over the last 2 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mahomes and company has had to come up clutch at times, especially late in games, in the postseason especially, but they haven't needed to as much over the last couple of seasons compared to Mahomes' first handful as a starter. Since 2018, when Mahomes became a starter, the Chiefs were averaging nearly 30 points or so per game until the 2023 season, when their average dropped all the way down to 21.8 points per game, and this year they're at 24.1 points per game. Again, based on how the defense has been performing over the last few weeks, That's not gonna cut it. You can't allow 25 points per game on defense and score 24 points per game on offense, at least on an average, and expect to keep winning, even though, yes, they have been able to pull off almost all of these wins with a much lower point differential compared to any other team in the league that has a similar amount or at least 9 or more wins. Two key ways to help with this is going to be scoring more touchdowns in the red zone. They are just 3 for 10 inside the 20 over the last 2 weeks. And then they also need to better protect Patrick Mahomes, who has already been sacked 32 times on the season and is on pace to get taken down nearly 50 times by the end of 17 games. He's been sacked 5 times in back-to-back games, and quite frankly, that's not only unacceptable, but it must change if the team has any hope of getting that three-peat. The good news in all of this is, I think the Chiefs might actually be up for the offensive challenge in theory. Isaiah Pacheco is back now, and in his return last week, he had a 34-yard run up the left sideline, which was the longest run of the season for the team. So hello, explosive run plays once again. Then another explosive playmaker in Hollywood Brown is reportedly looking to be back and playing by week 16 or week 17 per sources of Ian Rappaport. He has an appointment week 15 with his surgeon for final clearance, and if that happens, his 21-day window to return should open up. And that will definitely help in the passing game by giving Mahomes another speedy target that can be used in multiple different ways. And it will also take pressure off of DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce, and Xavier Worthy, among others, and give Mahomes yet another dependable target out there. With that being said, I am going to temper my expectations with Hollywood a bit, only because we really have no sample size of how he will look/perform in the Chiefs offense, considering he was hurt on the very first play of the team's first preseason game. It's gotta help though, as he will immediately raise the floor of that room and become the second fastest player out there on the field aside from Xavier Worthy. More speed increases the opportunities of explosive plays, which the Chiefs really lack this year in particular. Now, obviously none of this matters. Speed, explosive plays, etc. if Mahomes is pressured and sacked at the frequency he's currently been getting. Only the tackles of the Seattle Seahawks, have allowed more pressures than Jawan Taylor and Wanya Morris's 61 combined. Wanya has allowed 33, meanwhile Jawan has allowed 28. Then Jawan Taylor has been flagged 13 times, which is third most among all tackles, and that is something that, while I do like Jawan Taylor at times when he's not getting flagged, that is just as bad sometimes as giving up a pressure or a sack, is getting a 5 or a 10-yard penalty. So you have Jawan Taylor with 13 flags. That's third most among all tackles. Meanwhile, Wanya isn't far behind with 10 flags, which is 11th most among all tackles. And that is obviously way less than ideal. And when you see these flags and pressures happening on key downs and in the red zone, it's easy to see why the Chiefs offense has been struggling to score touchdowns inside the 20. There are some positives to the offense, though. They still move the ball well in general and are the best third down offense in the NFL. And the good news should, in theory, keep rolling here because offensive tackle DJ Humphries, is now on the roster, a longtime veteran, and if he can just be an above-average tackle for Mahomes' blind side, it's really going to help, guys. Let's just be honest here. The bar is already pretty low, and Wanya has been playing injured, so how much worse can Humphries really be? Andy Reid spoke to the media today and said he did a good job talking about Humphries. He did a good job last week, and they will do a little bit more with him here this week. They'll work him in and see how he feels, which is the most important thing since he hasn't played football in quite some time since tearing his ACL last year. For what it's worth, though, Humphries told the media last week that he's ready to go whenever. So if I had to bet on it, I would say Humphries dresses out Sunday, and there's a very real possibility he plays. After all, there is nothing more important on offense than protecting the blind side of your QB1. And when pressed about it today in his presser, Andy Reid said it's probably not fair to DJ Humphries to name a starter at the left tackle spot right now, but they will ramp him up at practice and see how it goes. And please, God, let it go phenomenally this week at practice, because Andy Reid then said he would prefer not to have to kick Joe Thuney out to the left tackle spot from left guard. So I doubt we see that happen again unless multiple injuries occur. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what must change for the Chiefs in the final stretch before the playoffs. If you want to beat 4 playoff teams out of your 5 remaining games, the offense is going to have to step up and get more points on the board. It's as simple as that. This can be done by better protecting Mahomes. DJ Humphries should help out with that, please, as well as have a few explosive plays here and there, plus getting 7 instead of 3 in the red zone. Pacheco and the soon-to-be very welcomed return of Hollywood Brown is definitely going to help with that in theory as well. And regardless of how the end stretch plays out for KC, just remember they already have a playoff spot locked in and will be getting key players back in time for the playoffs when it really matters most. With all that being said, let me know your thoughts on the Chiefs' identity needing to shift here ASAP. Do you agree that Mahomes and company need to help shoulder the load a bit more due to the struggles on defense? And if you do agree, do you actually think they can do it? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?